You all set the same spot. You guys.
I like
just
the,
got down to the church.
Just so they stay out of our way, Mr. Brown.
Someone came in and said,
Just so know.
oops, you could probably get rid of that.
All right, well, thank you all for being here today. It has been 1 year, at least according to the Star Tribune, since Mark Dayton's staff met with him pre-launch of MNsure to tell him that there were multiple problems with MNsure and that the launch might be a bit rocky, and he chose to move forward anyway. And of course, we have seen that since then we've had disaster after disaster, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. In fact, it seems to be getting a little bit worse. And earlier this week, you all know we learned that Preferred One, which was the provider with the cheapest rates and the most popularity, is pulling out of MNsure, which makes it pretty clear that Preferred One's low rates, which gave Mark Dayton his talking point, his political talking point about having the lowest rates in the nation, were not real. They were actually bogus. And I think it leads to a couple of important questions that really have to be answered. Number one, what role did the Dayton administration play in setting the Preferred One's rates within MNsure? And number two, and I think probably more importantly, what kind of pressure did the Dayton administration put on Preferred One to set their rates artificially low for political reasons? Mark Dayton isn't going to answer these questions. In fact, he doesn't appear to be answering any questions at all these days about issues. And you know what? It's time for answers. I think we have waited long enough for these answers, and since Mark Dayton refuses to answer them today, I'm calling upon the legislative auditor, Jim Nobles, to expand his existing audits of MNsure to include the role that the Dayton administration played in rate setting on the part of Preferred One. We need to get to the bottom of this. We need to learn what the heck is going on behind the scenes with the Dayton administration and MNsure, because something seems a little fishy. So with that, I'm going to call upon Senator Michelle Benson, and then we'll take your questions.
Good morning, and thank you. As a member of the MNsure Oversight Committee and the Legislative Audit Commission, I've been spending a lot of time looking at MNsure in the last 18 months, and what we have seen is a pattern of behavior in the Dayton administration of sweeping problems under the rug, not being transparent with the legislature, not bringing stakeholders to the table, and not being clear on how we're going to solve the problems that this administration has created in MNsure. And so that's why I think expanding the legislative auditor's role into rate setting and how these rates got set, when one of our major insurers pulls out of our exchange and uses the words financially unsustainable, that concerns me. The Commerce Department has an obligation to have rates that are set that are financially sustainable so that our insurance companies are not put at risk. So I would like to know how Preferred One got put into a position where they felt that their participation in MNsure was financially unsustainable. And so I hope Mr. Nobles will expand his audit to include looking at those items. Now let's step back for a moment and look at what has happened since Governor Dayton had that meeting a year ago. Has he been transparent with stakeholders? Has he been clear with the people of Minnesota how he's going to solve the problems? Or has he been ignoring it and being silent? Yesterday, we found out that they were publicly overstating their enrollment numbers. And instead of being transparent with the people of Minnesota, with the members of the legislature, they pretend it's no big deal. This is Governor Dayton's signature piece of legislation. For all of the other things that are in the news, this is the one he should be championing or correcting and protecting. Instead, he's silent. He's not leading, he's not problem solving, and he will not listen to the people who have a contrary opinion. You cannot solve problems if you won't listen to the people who are experts, to the people who saw these problems coming for 18 months. We have been clear what the problems were going to be, and they have all come to fruition. It didn't have to be this way, and Minnesota deserves better. That's why I'm standing here with Jeff. I know that when it comes to big issues, he will listen. He will respect the contrary voices. Governor Dayton referred to the MNsure Oversight Committee as a farce. That is not the way we do things in St. Paul if we want to solve problems and move forward. And that's why I'm proud to stand here with Jeff today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner, what exactly are you asking the legislative auditor to investigate?
I think we want him to investigate what role the Dayton administration had or what pressure they put upon Preferred One to set certain rates.
Why? And do you have some evidence to indicate that he met unethically, illegally, or put pressure on Preferred One to set those rates artificially low?
That's what we're trying to find out, because when you have you're essentially the biggest market player with 60% or nearly 60% of the market, just pull out completely and essentially say this was not sustainable, it raises some questions about what happened here and why did it happen. And so that's what we're trying to find out.
But do you have any evidence at all of what made you decide to call for this investigation? Is there any evidence at all that he did that?
There's just a lot of pieces to the puzzle that I think a lot of people are questioning. And frankly, for the last year, we've heard people talking about these rates, at least from Preferred One, seem low. We don't know that they can really sustain these. And so I think the question again arises, what happened here? That's all we're trying to find out.
So do you think that Preferred One should have come in higher last year and somehow they were told they couldn't?
I don't know, but that's what we'd like to know.
Could it not have been simply the way the industry works, which is that the pool of participants wasn't as large as Preferred One had hoped? In other words, not enough healthy people in to offset the sick people that came in. Hence, that Preferred One had made the mistake from the onset in making its rates too low? Is that, I mean,
If I may, the Department of Commerce is responsible for reviewing actuarial analysis and ensuring that that makes sense. Now, those of us who've been paying attention to MNsure since the beginning knew that the sickest people were going to come in and the healthy younger were going to stay on their parents' plans. And so how did we get here? That's the answer we're looking for. How did we get here? Why was a major insurer virtually scared out of MNsure? And Governor Dayton doesn't want to talk about it. How can there not be intellectual curiosity on the part of the administration? And because they won't answer questions, it's time for somebody to ask them. And Jeff is here to ask those questions. And the path to do that is through the legislative auditor. He is trusted, he is respected, he has the authority to do this. Now, if the Department of Commerce wants to come forward and answer the questions without an audit, I think that would be reasonable. But I don't see the Dayton administration owning responsibility for this or being very clear with the taxpayers of the state.
Yesterday, the governor said that his administration, and he in particular, do not dictate to the companies what their rates are. The notion that they set the rates is off base. Are you saying he's wrong?
I don't know. That's why we're asking the legislative auditor to look into this.
Well, Commissioner, you're a free market guy. Why is Preferred One not responsible for the actions that it takes entering a market? And if it didn't work for them, they pull out, and if it does, they stay.
Well, first of all, I'm always bothered when people call MNsure a market. It's not a private market. It's a government-run market, or government-run exchange, which is not the private market. Again, each of these insurers is going to be making decisions, but what I would like to know is whether there was pressure placed upon them by the administration to have rates that are lower than what was sustainable.
Have you asked them?
Have I asked who?
The insurance industry?
I have not.
So when the new rates come out on October 1st, if they're higher, that's a good thing, because that would mean, in your theory, that the administration didn't pressure them to keep rates low.
Yeah, I'm not sure high rates are ever a good thing.
So, but you're
Frankly-
saying the low rates were potentially the Dayton administration's fault. So if they're
No.
higher, that means,
No, absolutely not, Rachel. What I'm questioning is whether there was pressure to place the rates at such a low rate that they're not sustainable, that they're actuarially unsound. As Senator Benson mentioned, the Commerce Department's role is to make sure the rates are actuarially sound. It doesn't appear that these were.
and
did the Commerce
Senator
Department review?
Senator Benson said that this is Dayton's signature piece of legislation. Do you think this election will be won or lost on MNsure? Do you agree? It's signature?
I think it is. It's clearly his signature piece of legislation. I don't know if it will be won or lost on this particular issue, but I think this is a pretty important issue to people. their health insurance and how much they pay for it is a pretty personal thing to most people. And it's-
More than tax increases.
I don't know if it is, it probably depends on the person, but it's certainly important to most people.
Did the Commerce Department have review over all of the insurers that are part of the MNsure exchange? There were 5, now 4.
Yes, the Commerce Department reviews all the rates.
It had to review all of
It
that.
had to review all the rates.
So it, and it,
Preferred one appeared to be an outlier, and so what happened? All we want to know is what happened. And so far, Governor Dayton doesn't seem concerned as to what happened to cause a major insurer to pull out of MNsure. It leaves less choice for consumers. About 30,000 people now have to go through the chaos of finding their insurance again. And he's silent on it.
any
You want to
indication
talk
the
about an issue for the election, Governor Dayton being silent on 30,000 people losing their insurance is an issue.
Is there any indication the legislative auditor is going to, have you gotten a response from him yet? Just when
No,
it's going to be
we
done?
haven't.
He is, I mean, he's already doing a review.
He is already doing a program audit. He is doing a number of audits, federal grant audits.
I think he's doing an investigative audit also, and do you think he does not have access to every email that the governor's name is on, every phone call? He doesn't have that?
I do not know Mr. Noble's methods.
Sure.
I trust them. He is a good auditor. And we just want to emphasize that I frankly believe he has the authority to touch anything that touches MNsure, and we think this is an important issue.
But by investigate, would you mean have the governor come in, the commissioner come in and be interviewed by the legislative auditor, maybe even under oath?
I agree with Michelle that I trust Jim Nobles and whatever procedure he feels he needs to use to get to the truth.
Including under oath, the governor should be
If
investigated.
Jim Nobles believes that's necessary,
Do you?
I don't know. I'm not doing the audit, nor am I an auditor.
Commissioner, the way the DFL characterizes it, they say you want to repeal MNsure. Is that, would you agree with that characterization?
Actually, I've been pretty clear that I don't think we should eliminate MNsure just to move people over to the federal exchange, because they just go through the same nightmare again and we don't really solve the problem. I would love to see, as I've mentioned, a waiver from Obamacare so that we can start implementing some of the things that we were doing very well as a state pre-MNsure. We had probably had the best health insurance system in the country prior to MNsure. And so I think there are changes that can be made. I don't get to repeal MNsure. If we wanted to eliminate it, I would need to get the DFL Senate to agree with me.
And so could you talk about, envision ways in which it could work better? I know you said you would replace the board and some of the staff, but what are some ways MNsure could actually function well?
Well, I think number one, you replace the board. Number two, you replace the staff, at least the top staff. I think that there are some rulemaking changes that could be made that allow more public input as to what changes are made. I think that encouraging the MNsure board to have more competition within MNsure would be a huge positive. I also think outside of MNsure, eliminating barriers, as many as we can, to private sector competition with MNsure would be positive. More choices, more options. Anything you can do to give consumers more options is generally a good thing.
And you agree with the political goal of achieving 100% insurance coverage? Is that something that the state should aspire to?
I think 100% coverage would be wonderful. Who could argue that we don't want everyone to have insurance coverage?
Well, do you throw overboard in pre-Obamacare, pre-MNsure, some of the things that 26-year-olds on their parents' policy, lifetime limits?
If
You're gonna throw-
Minnesota had 25-year-olds covered, so if we want to.
Well, okay, let's go through them all then if you want to.
26.
How about a ban on lifetime limits? You want to
We
keep
already,
that?
we already had the
Pre-existing
25-year-old, we
conditions?
had our own high-risk pool,
Sure.
we had guaranteed renewal, so once you were insured, that's why.
That
when-
sounds like a yes.
So
And-
we
but
already
We'd
had.
like the candidate to answer that.
Yeah,
What was
absolutely.
that? I
I
didn't
just,
quite-
Well, are you going
I'm
to
sorry.
keep all of these things that are in the healthcare law right now?
I'm not going to go through each one individually, but I
Why?
think prior to MNsure, we had almost, if not all of them, in some form or another. But we didn't have a blown-up private marketplace prior to this.
I don't think we had all these things.
Okay.
You think we did?
I believe we had most of them.
On your point about more private sector competition, people can buy directly from the insurance companies now. Are you saying that those people should also be eligible to get subsidies by going?
I'm sorry.
The private market competition, nothing is stopping people from going directly to an insurance company now to get their plan. But they won't get subsidies unless they go through they won't be eligible for the tax subsidies unless they go through the MNsure. Are you saying that regardless of what portal you use, you should get access to the subsidies? Is that what you mean by more private sector competition to MNsure?
No, that's not what I meant. What I'm talking about is allowing more options outside of MNsure. We have a lot of mandates in the state right now, probably more than any other state, and that's been an issue in Minnesota for many years.
What mandates?
There are hundreds of mandates.
Give a couple that you know.
I'm not going to go there.
Why not? You're here talking about healthcare, I mean, you want out-of-state market, out-of-state.
Yeah, I don't have my
insurance
list of what we.
For
need to look
profit?
at, but,
Well, those are two questions. You want out-of-state options?
yeah,
How about
I'm not going to go
for-profit?
into those particular specifics today, Tom.
Commissioner, yesterday you said you couldn't recall if you had voted to remove benefits for Minnesotans on MinCare, remove their health care benefits. Do you remember now? Have you looked into that?
We did go back and look, and yes, that was part of the Palenti budget in which I believe it was GAMC, able-bodied adults without children were removed from GAMC.
So there's a question here. Why should Minnesotans be confident that you are going to protect their insurance coverage if you've already voted once to remove benefits for 38,000 people?
That was a decade ago in the midst of a very deep deficit that we were in the middle of, and that was part of the governor's plan to balance the budget without tax increases. We're in a different spot right now. We have MNsure sitting in front of us, and I think we have to figure out how to move on from that.
Would you like to take back that vote?
I don't know if I'd take back the vote or not. That was a very different time.
Should the state spend less to subsidize low-income people's health care?
I don't necessarily believe that, no.
So you're not looking at spending less on health care, you just want it to be spent differently?
Well, I think we could do it in a way that it's actually more consumer friendly. I think right now we're going to see, next year, we are likely to see huge spikes in premiums. We don't know that yet, but we're going to know that in a few weeks. And you know, that has a lot to do with government probably getting a little too involved in the private market.
So if government shouldn't spend less on health care, how are you going to make government spending smaller since that's about a third of the budget?
Well, part of the thing that I've talked about is an audit of everything. And I think we've got to look at programs and see which ones are actually working, which ones are actually producing results. And I know the governor doesn't agree with that and suggests that the legislative auditor should do that, which is kind of a fundamental misunderstanding of the legislative auditor's role. But that is, I think if you go through program by program by program, which is something that I'm trying to push on the county board, there's an opportunity for great savings there because you can start eliminating the programs that aren't actually helping people and keeping the programs, maybe in some cases even bolstering the programs that are.
Maybe it's too early in the morning, but that sounds like you do want government to spend less. on
Overall,
healthcare.
absolutely. Yes.
So you
Yeah, no, I
would
made
like
that
the
very
state
clear.
to spend less on subsidized health care?
I don't know where we're going to have less spending. It will depend upon the entire budget. It will depend on where we're sitting with respect to a deficit versus a surplus. But no, I've been very clear that the government spends too much money. I mean, when we saw an increase in spending of $30 billion to $40 billion in the last 4 years, for someone to argue that we don't have enough money in government, I think is a little out of touch.
Returning to the role of the Department of Commerce, are you suggesting that the Department of Commerce, in reviewing the rates that were put forth by these insurers from MNsure, are you suggesting that the Department of Commerce gave a pass, if you will, to this outlier, to preferred one, and this is a question for you, Commissioner, that the Department of Commerce, looking at these rates, knowing some of these would be sustainable, but this one would not, decided not to look the other way at preferred one's offerings?
We don't know. That's the question we're asking.
But are you
What
suggesting
happened?
that could have happened?
I think anything could have happened, and that's what we're trying to find out. We're not, the answers aren't there because the administration doesn't want to talk about it.
And if the Department of Commerce did that, why would it have done that? Why would it have looked the other way at one insurer, which is a small insurer? Why would it have given preference, if you will? Would there have been a political motive? Is that what you're suggesting?
There can always be political motives in politics. But I don't know, and that's what we're trying to find out.
Commissioner, are you still on track to be up in a paid TV ad campaign within the next 11 days?
Before the end of the month, yes.
Can I ask you about early voting, what starts today, what impact do you think that will have on voting and on your campaign?
Yeah, I don't know. We were frankly expecting it to have a bigger impact in the primary than it did. This might be different because people worry about lines and there may be much more interest in early voting. So we'll be paying attention to that, but I'm not sure what the effect
Do you
is.
think that's a good idea? Do you think this is a good idea to have people do this?
Yes.
Will you be encouraging, will your campaign be doing something to get out that vote?
Yes, we will, although I think the party will probably be more involved in that than we will. Anything else? All right, thank you all.
Good, thank you.
What's tomorrow's mission?
What's that?
What's tomorrow's mission?
So let's see, Saturday would be,
Mincher.
Do they start that?